PJ, thank you very much for talking to me today. I'm reading ARK. I'm loving it. I'm really enjoying it, genuinely. Tell me though, why did you choose the Templars as your subject for the trilogy?
I guess I could have chosen about 500 different subjects because there's lots of secret societies out there. So like, the Bilderbergers and the Freemasons, and then there's quite a list. But I guess for me, the Templars, for a number of reasons, they are connected to the biggest mystery of all, which is what happened to the Ark of the Covenant. And also because of 9 knights sent abroad from France to go and protect pilgrims. Why just 9? And then they housed themselves near the Temple of Solomon. And why did they do that? And then they were involved in the Crusades, and then they became this fantastic warrior monks who then invented banking systems, and they created architecture across the French skylines that nobody had ever seen before. And the maths and the geometry that was used, nobody knew anything about. And so it's just that whole mystery. And even if, with lots of these things, there's lots of supposition and somebody suggests this and it may be that. If you take all that away, the core of the history, is factual. And so then you add on this other stuff and you think if somebody, going back to the Ark of the Covenant, if somebody or an organisation's going to have the Ark of the Covenant, it will have been them.
And I mean, obviously you've done a lot of research and lived in that world as much as possible. Have you met anybody who you think might genuinely be connected in some way to the Templars?
So I'm going to answer the question this way, but not answer the question, okay? So I'm really lucky, Peter, that I meet some really interesting people who are really quite gracious with their time and their knowledge. So when I was writing ARK, like all of the books, I want them to be as accurate as possible, even though it's fiction. So if I'm talking about, pistols and rifles, I want to say the correct things about pistols and rifles and get the caliber right, etc. So I was really lucky that I met a guy in the south of England who is an arms dealer, a registered arms dealer. And he took me into his office, and after meeting him a number of times, and I explained that I needed some information, and he just sat and talked to me and showed me brochures about all of this stuff. So virtually everything in ARK to do with arms came from that guy. Everything to do with the religious side of prophecy, which is the second book, somebody helped me. And he's an ex-Orthodox monk in America, lives in New Jersey, Greg. He's a fantastic guy. So I try not to disrespect the subjects that I'm writing about, even though it's fiction. So he keeps me on the straight and narrow, and I can ask him a bunch of questions and we have discussions. Also in prophecy, there's lots of sword fighting with samurai swords or katana swords. So I have a great guy, Jason, in Kent, who's a great swordsman, and he teaches at 2 dojos. So I'm really lucky that a number of people, as I said, have been really gracious with their time. So in answer to your question, that's the answer to your question.
Right. Thank you. Now that brings me on to another point, because I'm reading the book and I'm thinking, wow, there's a lot of moving parts here. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of locations, there's lots of organizations, and it all interlocks. Do you plan that out beforehand, or do you just write whatever comes into your head as you go along?
I think a bit of both. The hard slog is where you're sitting making it up and that doesn't work and you're doing this. And then there are times when it just goes blub, 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 and you go, wow, look at that. Like, where did all of that come from? So it is a bit of both. And I don't know how that happens. I really, really don't. And normally when it's just flowing, normally the first draft is there or thereabouts right. Whereas, I can do 20 drafts of a chapter to make it sound right. That stuff just flows. I've heard people say that you don't find the story finds you. The story finds somebody to write the story. So sometimes that happens, sometimes not. And then I can speak to people and watch something on TV or read something, and it just triggers. And I think, what happens if that? So, for example, in ARK, there's a chapter or two about the Indian John Wolfe, and he's a true blood Indian. So in 1960, 1970, his father was killed, and it talks about him. And at that time, I was reading, I think, in the National Geographic about surface hunters who go along to native Indian burial sites and they steal arrowheads and all of that sort of stuff. So, I just thought to myself, that little Indian boy, 7 years old, who's holding his father's hand, watching this stuff, what does he grow up to become? How does that change him? So stuff like that happens.
Nice. Okay. Now, while we're on the subject of how you write, tell me a bit more about that. So I'm interested in the process. So, when do you write? Where do you write? What environment do you set up for yourself?
So I'm really lucky. I write anywhere. Wherever I am, and I can take 5 minutes, I'll write. But I have an office here at home, so in Spain. So I go to the office most days and I write. So I write in the mornings because I'm more perky, and do a lot of research in the afternoon because of the subject matter. I have to do a lot of research. So I write in the mornings. But in the winter, so around about the 27th, 28th of December, we go to Scotland and we hire a cottage for 3 weeks, and it's isolated, and it's on the coast. So it's about 3 miles from this sea that nobody wants to go near because it's December. So it's like a raging sea. So we have 2 South African Ridgeback dogs. So they're line hunters. So they need to run, and so we go down to the beach and there's nobody there, and they run for miles. And so it just allows your imagination to just, get carried away with itself, then go back to this cottage that we rent. And there's this great conservatory that overlooks virtually nothing except sort of glens. And I can just sit and write there. So I'm lucky I can write on airplanes, virtually anywhere. But the 2 primary places, I guess, are the office here and in Scotland.
Thank you, PJ.
You're welcome. Thanks, Peter.